make money. She would make it, she would make me shout. That would be good.
I have living room down there. I know. A bathroom. Well, after the majority.
Okay, we're ready now. Announcements before we start. We're back. Good. I did know you were gone. Where are you? You weren't here so late when we I was, but I forgot. We took Alex to Casper. Oh, yeah. For surgery. Did that go fine? Yeah, I went fine. He's still bleeding in places. He's doing okay. Okay, I'm good. I hope. Whose is this? It is a key if you have poor eyesight and has a green thing. I fell on my punch. Oh, well. I'm not gonna throw it. That's fine. It was in the hallway. Oh. Thank you. No. I'll just leave it behind. Okay, any other announcements? None? Okay, so let's pray since we're already a little bit back.
Kirsten can use some sleep. Pray that she could get some sleep. That would help her tremendously.
Anything else? Kirsten needs to get some sleep. She's having trouble sleeping. Hey, let's pray. Father, thank you for this evening and for the day that you've given us. We ask that we use it wisely and to glory. Help us this evening as we look at the word and hear your word to John for us and for the church through all ages. Help us to come away with insights that teach us more about your character and about how it is that we ought to be in this world and not of it. Be with Kirsten, give her needed rest over these next few days. And the problems that she's been having with sleeping and all of the other pain issues and vision issues, we ask that you would give her relief from those as well. Continue to guide us and be with those who are in need and help us to see ways to minister to them. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay. I won't ask because I know there was a lot of what we went over. Did everybody get the slide in the hallway? That looks like confusion. So on your way out, if you want those, there are 25 sets of them. 24 is about this one. So take them, and those should be useful for you if you want to look back through them. They're just what we have right there. I didn't include other. I don't type out separate notes like some people use in PowerPoint because I would never use them. This is everything that we went through in the past, and now we're really going to go back a little bit so that we can set ourselves up properly for the next theme that is not just the throne of God, but is the judgments that are being poured out onto Satan and his emissaries. I went through and fixed all of the headings, and it did it again after I fixed it. So we talked about how to read this book. We talked about the invitation to come up and to see what the heavens worship in the throne room of God is like. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but with the intent of the judgment is now escalating. We're not just focused on what the throne of God looks like, what the one who sits on the throne is like. But now we're transitioning from the heavenly vision of worship in heaven to God's plan of action, his battle plan, his opening the war scroll upon evil, and how exactly it is that the Lamb and his followers are going to engage the powers of evil in this battle that is both ongoing and is becoming final. We kind of interact in this area, which if you have the slides, good luck finding it, because the way the PowerPoint prints is right side up, and then you flip it, and it's upside down. All of school that bothered me, and I don't know that there's a way to fix it. But if you put up with that, you can go back through all of this. Because the narratives in Revelation, like we said, are somewhat cyclical. They're moving in one direction, albeit circularly. So we're revisiting the same things over and over again and being revealed more things about the reality with each unveiling. So there's a different perspective that's being shown through each revisiting of different details of the same narrative. And we talked about quantum physics and space time and all of that at the end last week. We're gonna have to revisit some more of that, even if it's just on the outer rim of it. Because reality as we currently see it, the intent that I've tried to get across, maybe haven't done so well. We currently see reality in how many dimensions, or at least perceive reality in how many dimensions? So if you go watch a movie, maybe I can go back to this screen. If you go watch a movie and they give you some of those glasses, what kind of movie are you seeing? 3D. Okay, so that includes sound, so dimension, space. That's the third dimension part of it, is they're adding somewhat depth and some sense of space to the movie. You know, sound, you're seeing things happen, space, dimensions. We have a fourth dimension of time that we're conscious of and that we can look back on and in some sense look forward towards. Revelation is not operating at this point in the narrative in 4 dimensions. We've exited 4-dimensional reality and have now entered into real reality. So C.S. Lewis calls our current 4-dimensional reality the Shadowland in the Chronicles of Narnia, because it's not as real as what is actually happening. We can't perceive what's actually happening. In some cases, Elijah seems to have been able to see portions of another reality that's not separate from ours. It's not layered on top of ours, but is part of ours, yet not visible within ours. Revelation is, to John, opening that reality up, and he's doing the best that he can to describe this is what's happening in reality. It's not like what we can see and taste and touch. It's more than that. It's beyond taste, touch, feeling, hearing, and time. It's eternal and it's ongoing, and it's not visible to our natural senses. But there are signs that show you these greater realities. Mixed into all of this is drawing on the ideas of creation and new creation and uncreation. We won't go into that. Uncreation, the redemptive arc from uncreation to creation to now. Lots of different narratives. We talked about diptychs. And this will be worth you going back and reading on your own when you have the slides and access to that, is to read these different two-sided two sides of the same coin, two-sided narratives. Particularly, it's interesting to look at Daniel's connections and the other ones in Daniel 11 as well. Okay. We talked about, see, why is that even necessary? That's a three-letter word. It's not ran out of space. That one's five. It doesn't make sense. And so now we get here. So let's read. We're gonna go back here and say, we're going back to here. We're going back to chapter 7. After this. So what is it after? It's after God said, this is the kind of judgment that's going to occur, and the powers of this world are gonna cry out beneath the mountains and the caves and the rocks and say, save us. Who can escape? Well, the followers of the Lamb can escape. Look at chapter 4. After this, I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth. And if you look at the picture, and we have some other ones, but this one was pretty good depiction. The 4 corners, north, south, east, and west, the pillars of the earth. Remember, in Revelation, we're not dealing with a somewhat spherical globe. Right? The world is not actually, or so they say, I can't prove it. The world is not actually a perfect sphere. It's all belong in some way, shape, or form, depending on where those and all that. Okay. We're not dealing with that revelation. We're dealing with what my brother believes in. An earth that is maybe more like that. Except no, this is more like a plate. Okay. The heavens above, the firmament below, right? We're dealing with what is essentially a ancient cosmology. So there's 4 pillars that are holding up the firmament of the ground in this way of seeing it. This is what's being described in Genesis also. You can't gain a whole lot of cosmological insight into the physical realities of the earth based on the accounts in Genesis. This is not trying to describe it. Describing reality as it's understood in the context. So, 4 pillars. There's 4 angels standing on the 4 corners. So, they have authority over all the earth, is what we're trying to say. Holding back the 4 winds of the earth, so that no wind might blow on earth or sea or against any tree. And I saw another angel ascending from the rising of the sun with the seal of the living God, and he called with a loud voice to the 4 angels who have been given power to harm earth and sea, saying, do not harm the earth, or the sea, or the trees, until we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. And I heard the number of the seal, 144,000 sealed from every tribe of the sons of Israel. 12,000 from Judah, 12,000 from Reuben, 12,000 from Gad, 12 from Asher, 12,000 from Naphtali, 12,000 from Manasseh, 12,000 from Simeon, 12,000 from Levi, 12,000 from Issachar, 12,000 from Zebulun, 12,000 from Joseph, 12,000 from Benjamin. Who got left out? Dan. Dan has been replaced. Why? Strange question. Why was Dan replaced? This is at least my thought. To do this much well and figure it out if you have questions about that. Gross idolatry. Unresolvable divorce from the people of God and from the God who has made himself a people. And so they are not represented in the new creation, in the new kingdom, because those that are idolatrous, those that serve other gods, they're not among the followers of the Lamb. They're among the followers of the powers of this world, which it would be worth your time to go back and reread Deuteronomy 32 to see exactly who the powers of this world are. And that's who John, in his revelation, is equating Rome and all of these other powers with. These are the fallen sons who are currently ruling the earth. And those that serve their gods, those that serve the representatives of Satan, are not included in God's holy people. We have a perfected 12,000 that equals 144, not to represent the exact number of those that are gods. Remember, we're working in signs and symbols. We're working in illusion. Not illusion like confusion, illusion like I'm up with an A. I'm alluding to something. We're alluding to the fact that God's perfected people is a pure people. It's a whole people. And it's the continuation of Israel, of the 12 sons who have now become the 12 apostles, who are now not just 12, but have made all saints of all of God's who he's brought into his new kingdom. All of the followers of the Lamb. After this, I looked and behold, a great multitude. We have a lot to say about this, and some of it could possibly be offensive. So, yeah. After this, I looked and behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, with palm branches, with hosannas in their hand, and crying out with a loud voice, salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. And all the angels were standing around the throne, and around the throne and around the elders and four living creatures, and they fell on their faces before the throne and worshipped God, saying, Amen, blessing and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving and honor and power and might to our God forever and ever. Amen. Then one of the elders addressed me, saying, who are these clothed in white robes, and from where have they come? I said to him, Sir, or Lord, you know. And he said to me, these are the ones coming out of the great tribulation. I warn you, I think it would be inappropriate to say that when John says these are those coming out of the great tribulation, to ascribe a certain period of time to that, because what it seems that he's alluding to is all of time after the ascension of Christ, those in the tribulation now. So the seven churches, representative of the whole church that he addressed earlier, are included in this. Every age following that is included in this. Our current age is included in that. Those who have come out of the great tribulation. So we're talking about particularly, it seems, martyrs. Though I won't constrain to that right now, but it seems to be when he say the ones coming out of great tribulation, they have washed their robes and made them white in what? In the blood of the Lamb. It purifies, it cleanses, it makes pure. If you have the slides after this, you can go back to the symbol index. And these colors in their own context, he is being particular with what he uses where. Right? So the horses aren't just red, black, white, and greenish, gray for no reason. They are those colors because those are representative colors to who he's talking to his context. White, being pure, still has kind of held till now. There is a weird phenomenon, I think Eastern Europe is where this was true at least at one time. And I can't remember, so don't quote me on this. At one time, this was true in the Near East. Black was actually in color and purity, and white, the inverse. not associated with the same type of holiness purity that we associate. In this case, though, life is pureness. I don't want to make too much of it, but there's some poetic quality in the fact that he points out they took dirty garments, we're assuming they were dirty, and washed them in blood. And out of that, they came
White.
clean, white. Again, we're not dealing in 4D and in things that we think should make sense. We're dealing in symbol. Therefore, they're before the throne of God and serve him day and night in his temple. And he who sits on the throne will shelter them with his presence. They shall hunger no more, neither thirst any more. The sun shall not strike them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb in the midst of the throne will be their shepherd. Okay, again, I mean, it's worth just sitting with some of the poetic nature of this. The Lamb who is in the midst of them will be their shepherd. I don't think there's anything vastly theological about that. I just think, hey, we're doing an inversion thing here. It's worth us noticing that he's calling Jesus the Lamb, also the shepherd. He's calling you his sheep, but who are also simply his martyr ones. It's upside down. It's messed up. And he will guide them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away every tear from your eyes. Okay, now we pause. We pause and we go backwards after we make a comment about these. Does anybody know what this and the previous image are called? It has a name. And it's supposed to depict this that we just read. So, especially in Orthodox circles, this would be located right there in the dome. In the center of the building, or at least, if not the center, it would be placed over the altar, right? Which is to represent Christ Pantocrator, Christ over creation, Christ over all creation, Panto, all, and Kratar, sort of, creation. Is representative, he is over everything. You have the angels surrounding his presence, surrounding his throne. I especially like the one on the right. There's one I could not find. It's the best one, I think, the best icon of this. You have the stars represented around him. You remember our discussion on astral imagery and conferring deity. What you're seeing in the throne room scene here is what, at least in these Orthodox churches, what they're trying to represent visually is that you look up and you see the Christ who is over all creation, who holds all power, who is in control of all things. And if you've ever wondered, because I did for a little while, if you've ever wondered on, if you see things like this, typically in Orthodox icons, the left one, you can probably guess on your right, those two symbols to each of the sides. That's Alpha and Omega. This one could be, it looks like, what is that supposed to say? We're gonna, okay, ICXC, we're gonna say it with English letters. ICXC, and anybody got a guess? Okay, so even though it looks like a C, that's a cursive script stigma in Greek. Jesus, so I, what we would ascribe J, because there were no J's in Latin or Greek, or Hebrew for that matter, it's a new letter. Jesus, and then the second half, yes, the second part, if the C is another S to us, and the first one is the Chi, Christus, Christos, Jesus Christos, they're saying Jesus Christ. There will sometimes, like this one, nope, different one. Oh, this one, here it is. That one's really stinking good. Usually his arms should be out because you're representing he has control over all of creation. He's literally holding creation together. This one you have Jesus Christ on the one side, and then under it, it's hard to read, but Hopento Crater of all creation. It was worth including that because that bit of art that you look up and it's supposed to remind you of the reality that when I look up, it's him who is holding all of this together. In the same way that John's invited us to see that this is the reality. God is holding all things together. God and his angels, his Elohim, his divine counsel, his divine beings are holding it all together. This is where things get a little convoluted in some way. And I'm going to try to make this connection because I think it also connects to Acts 2, to Peter's sermon. There's a lot of things going on there, and there's a lot going on right here. And this is one of the areas that bothers me a lot. So I'm going to try not to be too biased. The throne room scene that we're seeing here in Revelation is an undoing of the Tower of Babel. Just like Acts 2 is an undoing of the Tower of Babel. In what way? So, okay, we go back to Genesis chapter 11, and we read of the events that are taking place there. And if you look anything up online, people say a lot of negative things about God and God's intent with confusing the language of them. If you'll bear with me with this, I don't think that to read it that way is to understand what it is that God's doing and how it is consistent with his covenants with Abraham, with Moses, and the one that he initiates through Jesus. Now, the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. And they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens. And let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed on the face of the whole earth." Pay attention to that last phrase there before we start to blame the Lord for things. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of man had built. And the Lord said, "Look, they are one people." Now, bear with me, just like in Job, just like we have in some of the Psalms, and just like has occurred in Revelation, who is God talking to? Talking apparently to the divine council, talking to the other creations that are in service to him, that are dwelling currently within the outside of our periphery realm. We can't perceive it. He's speaking to them. He says, "Look, they're one people. They have one language." And this is only the beginning of that, what they will do. And nothing that they propose to do will now be possible for them to come. Let us go down there and confuse their language so that they may not understand one another's speech. So Yahweh dispersed them from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore, its name is called Babel, because there the Lord confused, which is a play on words, the word for confused their language of all the earth. And from there the Lord dispersed them all over the face of the earth. We read that, and if we read it in one sense, we say, well, why is God afraid of them being all together and setting out to do these huge things? And if we simply read it that way, then we're left confused. But if we read it in light of what we know through Daniel and through Revelation, and through what we know just by living, of what empires create and do, then we understand what God's intent is. They're intending to make a name for themselves and to be great, lest they be scattered among all the earth. This is before the Lord scatters them. The nature of the empire is always predatory. Always. There is never once in the history of humanity that empire building has not been predatory on whom? On the weak, on other people. So if we look at Babel as an example of the first great empire that's attempting to be built, God says, no, this is not what humanity is made for. They're not made for empire building. They're not made for making a great name for themselves at the expense of everyone else. In fact, I think that this is true. Humanity is not made to speak one language and to be simply one people of one culture, of one assimilation into one big hodgepodge under the guise of empire. And whatever God may ascribe itself as being worthy of worship in that empire. So they say, let's build us a city. In God's kingdom, it is not one people of one language that say of themselves, let's make a great name for ourselves. What you see is the opposite in Revelation 7. You see many people of many tribes and many nations and many languages who don't make a great name of themselves, but who are giving glory to the name of God. Oh, okay, we'll read through this stuff. Make these connections clear, because if we can't see this in Revelation, not just this, but where we're going with this, if we can't see this in John's Revelation, where he's trying to rip off the mask of power, rip off the mask of the false reality that we can easily become convinced of, if we can't see what he's saying, it's going to be hard to hear the encouraging message of the triumph of the Lamb, because we're triumph over what? What is there to triumph over? Everything's good. So the Tower of Babel is scattered. Well, why? Psalm 96 seems to indicate God's intent for humanity is to declare his glory among the whole earth, among the nations, his marvelous works among all the peoples. The commission from Jesus to make disciples of all nations, to immerse them and baptize in the name of the Father, Son, and Spirit. That acts that you're sent to go and to be witnesses to tell people about Christ everywhere, not just in Jerusalem, not just in Babel, not just in one city with one people that's like us and who's assimilated well, but to everyone in Judea, Samaria, and to all the ends of the earth. He initiates it with Abraham. He says, I'm going to make you into a great nation and bless you. And I'll make your great name great. And you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and curse whoever curses you. And all the peoples of the earth will be blessed through you. God's character and intent for humanity has always been, and has never been thwarted, has always been that it is a diverse people who he calls his own, not a people that is simply the same one, perfectly assimilated into their own empire. Because he's building a kingdom for himself, not a kingdom of men. We see in Genesis, he establishes the garden. In Revelation, he restores the purpose of the garden. For all peoples, nations, and languages, more than anyone can count, to gather around the throne of God and to offer glory and praise and thanksgiving and honor to the Lord. I want to at least propose that at this point, before we get into the judgments that God is going to give, the plagues that are Egypt's plagues, and the wrath that is to come, that John is prepping us to be able to see and is disclosing to us that the Lamb's kingdom and followers is nothing like the kingdoms of this world. That the kingdoms of this world, Rome in particular in his case, that power in this world ascribes deity to itself. Power in this world says, worship me. I'm worthy of worship. They present themselves as inheritors to the throne of God, but Revelation shows us that there is only one heir to the throne. And we just read about the inauguration of the Lamb, the Lion of Judah. He takes his place in the midst of the 24 elders and the martyrs and the angels and the four living creatures, and they give him glory and honor and praise. All others are pretenders to the throne of God. This is where it's possibly could get offensive because, and I don't know any other way to do it. We have to be able to recognize that when we read Revelation, that he's talking about us too. He's not just talking about Great Britain of the 1840s or whoever the other world powers are now. He's not just talking about China. He's not just talking about South Korea or North Korea, Japan. He's talking about what power does. It isolates itself. It uses violence as a means to control. It uses violence as a means for gaining power and retaining it. This is not the way of the Lamb. The way of the Lamb is to die. The way of the Lamb is to receive violence and harm and to leave the vengeance, the judgment of Satan, of his emissaries, of those aligned with his delusion, to leave that in the hands of God. Yes.
Does it make you wonder what with the advent of AI, that whatever the idea is that might be presented, that it can be translated into Chinese or Japanese or whatever language, because it's all the same. Right. It's all the same language, so, and like you say, we're part of that, so, I guess my curiosity is, I wonder, I mean, I know God created that, so obviously he has a plan. Right. But, I mean, it's something that we've never seen before.
Yeah. Not since the Rosetta Stone, at least, which is maybe the first large language model that the world conceived of. Personally, no, I don't like any of the artificial intelligence stuff. There is some usefulness for it, and I can acknowledge that. I don't like any of it.
And the genius.
Yeah, there's uses for it, but maybe it has some positives.
When you see Satan using it though,
Oh, well, yeah, of course he's going to. He uses anything that humans can possibly conceive of. AI is not left out of that, which is a good reason to be aware of the fact that, hey, anything that can be conceived by the human mind is likely, positively, has a depraved side to it, even in its best forms. Yes, George.
I was just reading that some of the colleges are doing their testing orally so that AI, they can't get their answers back. Well, that's an interesting choice.
one of the things about 8 years ago that we talked about, not a lot, but we brought it up. It's funny you mentioned that because cultures like the one John's in and the one that Jesus was put into, they had a written culture, but still at that time, oral speech and recollection was trusted far more than what was written down. That had been the case for all of human history up to that point. Really, it stayed the case until you have the Gutenberg press come along and books become widely popularized. Well, why would you trust what somebody says and can recollect? We have all these great Greek plays that we read parts of them and what we have of them written down in written form. Well, why wouldn't you trust the written word? It's not because everybody was stupid. And it's not because anybody was less intelligent because they couldn't read or write. Their memory for being able to speak discourse after hearing it was likely, it's not even likely, was simply better attuned than what we have currently. We don't really do a whole lot of that. But you could forge documents way easier than you can forge an oral story that everybody's heard. We heard Sophocles give that same story 3 weeks ago, and what you just said disagrees with what Sophocles says. That's not the story of Israel. We heard Moses give us the account of what God told him on the mountain. And Aaron, what you just repeated back to us is nothing like it. But the weird thing is that with AI and with the introduction of emojis and texting type language, we have in some ways begun re-adopting petroglyphs, hieroglyphs as ways of speech. We have done what Hebrew is like this to me. We have said, we don't actually need all these vowels. I can say that by just saying THT, which is how Hebrew operates. They don't include the vowels. We just need the consonants. Let's make it brief. In some ways, we're going, I shouldn't say backwards, reverting back to things that we're like, we have reached the epitome of communication. And then comes AI, and then comes texting, and then comes all of this. And really, not much has changed at all. We still communicate in the same ways that we always have, through pictures and as sparse communication as it possibly can be. That was a long-winded way to say your point was good. Okay. These are somewhat out of context. I'll try to read the context behind them. Barry, go ahead. Before you jump off, I'm trying to jump off.
Just to kind of go back to what you talked about, the tower. Reminded, I can't remember exactly, maybe from the Westminster Confession, but the way that it's explained is that with the fall of man has completely lost any ability of will to do or to perfect or to make anything good, spiritual, in a spiritual sense. We don't have it in us. We can't do it because of the fall. And so there has to be an outside force that does that. And so when you look at the text of what happened at the tower, they're gonna make a great name for themselves. Man is gonna make a great name for himself. But the Creator says, no. You don't have the ability to do that. I'm gonna shovel you that you don't have the ability to do that. And besides that, this whole thing that we call creation and the whole thing is designed for what we're told over and over in scripture, Romans 3:21, 3:26. It's so that he will make a great name for himself.
Right.
Doesn't have anything to do. We're part of that.
Yeah.
And so that whole idea of we're gonna make a great name for ourselves is just completely, we don't have the ability to do it. We can't justify ourselves. We can't even will ourselves to be justified or saved. We can't do it. It's impossible. But he can do it, and he can make a great name for himself through us. He just
Right.
has to do that. And that's a point that shouldn't be lost on us because that explains so much of not only what Revelation is talking about here, because that's, you know, you just, yeah, that slide up there a while ago about division. Yeah, wasn't it, we try to get them mixed up. Anyway, our Lord and God, which is the first, is within the Roman history, he was the first one to kind of split from the sin and say, you know, I'm not what the greatest among equals. I am your Lord and God.
He's the first living emperor who ascribes deity to himself while he's alive. The emperor cult up to that point was always after the Caesar's death. The people would deify it. Yeah.
So he's not, it's the same thing. He can't make a great name for himself.
Yeah, he's committing the same, and you see this a lot. He's committing the same issue. This is the issue that we have in Daniel. Remember when we visited Nebuchadnezzar? What's his problem? He's doing what Domitian is doing. He's doing what Nero attempted to do, what Nero's followers attempted to do after his death, to make a name that's great for himself, to make himself God, to institute worship of himself, right? And the Tower of Babel is the antithesis of, it's the antitype of, I think, if we want to look at this in three phases, if we're going to zoom out, here's what Revelation's doing. We have the creation of the garden in creation, which I've said before, and said even to remind you of a cosmological temple, of a temple of God, the perfected place where his prophet, priest, and king people are in service to his glory in the perfected garden. Okay. And I say it is a temple because it looks a whole lot like the temple designs that you get in Leviticus. Okay. All of the orientation, the directions everything faces, the plants that are involved, all of this. And God is passing by, he's in the midst of the temple, his presence is there. So you have the creation of not just the earth, but the center of God's presence in the garden. We go to Babel just after the description as a cleansing and uncreating, right? So he created, he uncreated, and now we're just a few generations later. Babel is attempting, likely, this is the ziggurat in the picture here. The previous picture, probably not even close, probably not spot, probably ziggurat. Babel's doing what? They're making a new temple city for who? Is it for the glory of God? It's for the glory of man. So what happens? He uncreates their creation. Again. Says, no, this is not the way. Scatters them, and in Revelation, what we have Rome, who has the city set on 7 hills, right? Has made itself great, made a great name for itself, and by all appearances, looks like they hold the power, and the mission, probably the emperor at this time, is saying just as much. Says, worship your Lord and Savior, Domitian. And what does God reveal in 1 through 7, he says, no, this is what God's temple looks like. And what we're gonna see is John sees the new Jerusalem coming down out of heaven and becoming one with earth. Which is to say what? The throne that we've just seen, the temple that God dwells in, the throne room of God, is now revealing itself from heaven to the powers of this earth, and he's revealed as the true God, as the one who's truly worthy of worship, as the one that all things are for him and through him, and that all of this stuff, the little ants that make their beautiful hills here on earth, and destroy and kill and assimilate, they're nothing in comparison to this. We are not guiltless in that, and I know you all know that. But at times we need to be reminded of it, that we find ourselves, I guess that's really complex and good and big book on this whole issue, City of God. Would worth you reading over the next 10 years. You try to read it all at once. You're going to
Repetition, you get it.
Yes. Yes, that book, he repeats the same thing in the first 3 or 4 chapters in 10 different ways, and you just want to raise that. Say, oh my goodness, 4 minutes. Okay, we're gonna read some of these. We know it's song. I like Teddy Roosevelt. He did a lot of good things. He did some not so great things. This is what empires do, though. This is the sentiment they have. Every immigrant who comes here should be required within 5 years to learn English or leave the country. Assimilation. You become one of us. We have room but for one language, and that's the English one. You have all these in your slides. And it's consistent, because this is what empires do. You assimilate to the empire when the empire does not want to. There is no room for you here. This is so strange, because this is how empires, this is how Rome works too. While Rome's out conquering and making peace by making deserts, this is how empires make peace, right? Peace through strength. You conquer and you destroy and you flatten, and of course everything's peaceful in the dust settles. There's no one alive to say anything about it. This is how Rome does it. This is how every empire's always done it. I don't remember if that was Coolidge or no, that would have been Roosevelt, but the other one. The Nazis have announced their intention to exterminate the Jewish people in Europe. Such acts can only strengthen the determination of all freedom-loving peoples to overthrow the barbarous tyranny of Hitler. And he's right. At the same time, the same politicians and the same people in the same country are advocating and are all for Japanese American citizens to be being put in internment camps. It's weird how the mirror of empire looks the same, just with different fonts, different strokes, different colors. Sand Creek Massacre, referring to not far from here. Kill and scalp Paul, big and little, mincemeat twice. This is about Wounded Knee. Pioneer has before declared that our only safety depends on the total extermination of the Indian. California, war of extermination will continue to be waged between the races until the Indian race has become extinct. And our third president, if we're ever constrained to lift the hatchet against any tribe, we will never lay it down until that tribe is exterminated or driven beyond the Mississippi. Prior quote that he says regarding this is that by death, we will take their noble leaders and force them to either give up their lands or to be taken out by their own people. So we look at these and we say, there's a lot of positives to where we live, and anyone in any country should be able to say that, and in cases you can't, then that's a sad state. But we also can't be deluded into thinking that when we read Revelation, that our empire is any better than the Roman Empire. or the Assyrian Empire, or the Babylonian. Not 40 years prior to us going into war, not 50 years prior to us going to war with the express intent that we say they're causing a Holocaust, a destruction of people, they're causing a genocide. We were carrying out the last few battles of our own genocide. The irony there is hard to miss, is it depends on what people are being destroyed in the name of maintaining power. It depends on who's inconvenienced. This is how empires operate. And this is what John shows us. They're predictable. This is, we're gonna go like 3 more minutes over. Bear with me. It's predictable. We're currently, I don't even care about my opinion about it because it's stupid. Especially since we heard the exact opposite 3 months ago. For the last 30 years, since Bill Clinton, and even prior to that, 1979, where there were real issues that were going on and maybe need to be dealt with, maybe not by us. We're currently in a war, and the reasons for why are not apparent. They are patently unclear and inconsistent. How is it inconsistent? Well, just last year, apparently, these nuclear weapons that are so important in getting rid of, Israel sent bunker buster bombs and said, we have destroyed all of their nuclear capabilities in Tehran. And they shouldn't have any type of production that can persist for at least a few years. What was the first reason that we gave when we wanted to invade? We said that they have a nuclear weapon, they're close to it. It's exactly what Bill Clinton said, it's what George Bush said, it's what Barack said, it's what Donald says, it's what Israel said, it's what everybody said. And there's no clear answer. This is how empires operate. It's not in truth. It's in the small lie that we can get away with long enough to get what we want. This was recent. Augustine City of God defines a commonwealth in regard to Rome as who he's discussing. A commonwealth is one that has the destiny of all the people. And he says, Rome, or any of the great powers of our day, cannot fulfill this. They don't have the best interest of all of their peoples involved. Only the kingdom of God can claim that is for the wealth and the well-being of all of its members, that it exists. Otherwise, it's not a commonwealth, and it doesn't actually exist as a legitimate empire. It exists as an empire that seeks to poach. And the kingdom of God exists not like that at all. It's Christ and his people, Christ being glorified through his people for the benefit and the good of his people eternally. Okay, this is the last thing we'll say before we get to next week's stuff and before we sing a little song. I give you all those not to say America bad or anybody else good. It's to say everybody, every nation, every power at many points bad. The only good one is God's kingdom. And this is what John has been trying to show us until now. And if we don't get it right now, whenever the judgments start, we're going to be tempted to say, that's harsh. We're going to be tempted to say, yeah, of course, that Rome deserves that. Saying, this is God's way, his treatment of evil generally, a power that seeks to exalt self rather than the creator, rather than God. This is how God deals with evil and manipulative and self-serving power. And the good news of all of that we won't be able to see unless we see world power through all history for what it is. And we can admit the good stuff too, but we have to be able to see both. Cause there was great things about Rome. Great things about Greece. What we won't be able to see is that the triumph of the Lamb is a miraculous thing and is a powerful thing. And it's something that we get to be involved in. Is all of the troubles of this world, all of the power struggle and all of that garbage that's constantly on whatever news network you watch and has been in every news rag for the last 2,000 years. And all of that is going away and it's gonna happen in one snap of the fingers. Because the one who actually has the power to control reigns in heaven. And he's awaiting judgment because of his mercy and his long suffering. That, as we go into next week, when we talk about some of these judgments, is the message to leave with. Is God is triumphing over evil. He's triumphed over evil in Israel's day. He's triumphed over evil in the church's day, and he continues to triumph over evil despite what it looks like in our vision, our view of the now. He triumphs over evil even now. Okay. Any other last questions, comments, just marks? That was 6 minutes, not 30. Okay. Yeah, right.
I just said it on there.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I could give you just 1,000 caveats so that you didn't misunderstand things I'm saying, but we'd be here for 2 more hours because 785. We're only gonna sing the first verse and then Tom with 2 different closings there. I hope I remember the song. There's a wonderful place we call home. It's a city of glory divine. It is built in the garden of grass, and the beautiful shall be mine. Oh, wonderful Eden so blessed, where Jesus the Master has gone to prepare us this glorious home. There he bids us the welcome to God. Oh, wonderful city of God, just across in that beautiful time, where the angels sweet echoes of song, and musical cadence is time. Oh, wonderful city of God, by faith in the distance I see, there's a mansion prepared over there. Yes, a place in that city for me.
Oh, that can, we're very thankful for the opportunity we have to sleep in together. This book is, this can become frustrating and difficult to understand, but we appreciate the teaching and the, effort, but let us always remember that there's a great war in the universe between, you and Satan. And this book is affirmation over and over again that you win. So we're pleased to be on your side as your people and help us to be educated and informed so we might be more effective and well, we're in this place and help us always look forward to that beautiful city that created for us for eternity and then for the simple pleasure that we'll have being in the presence forever and ever and ever. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you.
Too early, too early. Gone. Gone. So I'm only way to.
Work all day? Have you worked all day? I've worked all day. It's not two hours, two hours too long. I know.
So you get up 5 o'clock in the morning.
Somebody makes you stand still. So why? Gotta go.
Sit still. Rejoin the. Good. And then we'll have to hire them. We kind of heard that.
Yeah. She said it's free.
See you later. I get to sleep in with the tea tomorrow. No. Get up at 4:30 last night this morning. I tried to stay up a little later, so I can sleep in and I. I got nothing on 5. Yeah. Come home. Work on something. And I can be last, right, roll. Hopefully by the end of the day.